When breakfast and dessert collide, you know it's going to be good. Cinnamon rolls are just one of those age-old classic recipes that pretty much everyone loves. I'm kind of obsessed with them even though I've only made them a couple of times, but I grew up eating those Pillsbury store-bought rolls all the time, which I do need to try that viral TikTok hack for store-bought cinnamon rolls. If anyone's tried it, let me know. And I also really need to try Cinnabon because I've never tried that in my life, which is surprising. Anyway, before I go further off on a tangent, let me show you how I make my cinnamon rolls. From scratch is always best. As usual, I made a larger portion of this because I was making it for a large group of people, but what I say and what I have in the description below is for a standard recipe which makes 12 cinnamon rolls. This is kind of based on my king cake recipe, which is one of my most successful videos so far, so if you like cinnamon rolls, you should also check that out because it's really good. I'm starting with 240 milliliters or a cup of whole milk that I've warmed to between 90 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to dump 1 packet or 7 grams of active dry yeast into that, and I'm going to steal a bit of the 100 grams or a half cup of sugar that I've already weighed out. Mix all that together and let it proof, and we can start getting the rest of the ingredients together. I'm adding 480 grams or 4 cups of bread flour to my stand mixer bowl, along with 6 grams or a teaspoon of kosher salt, as well as the rest of the 100 grams of sugar. Give those dry ingredients a head start with the dough hook, and that's right, it's the return of the frothy boy. Once he's ready, you can dump him into the dry mixture. And of course, I forgot to do this with the dry ingredients, but I'm grating in a little bit of nutmeg. Just a few seconds worth will do. I'm going to start mixing that together on low speed, and once that starts coming together, I'm going to add in 1 whole egg plus 1 egg yolk. Let that start becoming a dough, and then you can add in your half stick or 57 grams of softened butter. Just knife in a small chunk at a time to let it incorporate, and then you can start mixing this on high speed to knead it. This is sort of like a brioche style dough, so it should take like 8 to 10 minutes on high. You'll know you're done when you're able to stretch the dough pretty easily without tearing it, and you may need to add some more flour depending on a lot of factors, but just check. It should be tacky but not too sticky to stick completely to your hands when you touch it. And then it's time to transfer that to a large greased bowl and cover that up and let it rise. I used to cap my rises for doughs like this to like an hour every time, but I've been finding way better results when I rise these for longer. So if you have the time to go 90 minutes to 2 hours, that's great. I went for 3 hours actually. I just think it makes the final texture a little nicer and it infuses that yeast flavor really deeply. But while that's rising, we can get our filling ready. I'm doing 130 grams or 2/3 of a cup of dark brown sugar, but light brown sugar works as well. And I'm going to add in 8 grams or a tablespoon of cinnamon and a pinch of salt, which makes everything taste better. Just whisk that up to disperse the cinnamon and try to break apart those chunks of brown sugar. And once my dough is risen, I'm going to lightly flour a clean work surface, and please clean your countertops before you do this. Just dump your dough ball onto the countertop and get flour on both sides so it doesn't stick. Really make sure you get flour underneath it because you don't want it to stick to your counter after you roll it, which we're going to use a floured rolling pin and start to press this out into a flat rectangle. The size doesn't need to be completely accurate, but in hindsight I should have gone a little longer and a little less wide with it. Just know the wider that you go with it, the taller your cinnamon rolls are going to be, but they're going to have less rolls, whereas the longer vertically that you go, you're going to have less height, but it's going to have more rolls inside. Also, try to get this to a pretty flat thickness. I should have gone even thinner than I did here. Again, that'll allow you to have more rolls, which means more layers of the filling, which tastes better. And by the way, there's 2 separate doughs for me because again, I made that extra portion for the large group I was making it for. But in any event, before we start filling these, we need to put a sticky layer down to catch all the filling. And why not pick something that tastes really good? Softened butter. I'm using 56 grams or another half stick of butter, and I would say to take this a step past room temperature, as in almost melting, because you want to really be able to spread this without tearing the dough underneath it. But you can just use a knife or a spoon or your fingers to spread this evenly across the dough. And don't worry about getting every single crevice and corner of this, because that's why I have a second ingredient, which is heavy cream. I just have a little splash, maybe a tablespoon or so, and I'm just using a pastry brush to spread this evenly and fill in all the gaps. Both of those are going to taste really good inside. Then you can evenly sprinkle your cinnamon sugar mixture all over the dough. You might have a little left over, which is always fine. Just don't pile it too high, try to spread it into an even layer and kick off any extra that you have. Then we're going to roll it, which you do need to be kind of careful with. Start slowly from one long end and just work your way down, trying to keep it as even and as tight as possible. If it's loose at all, it's going to make your rolls lopsided and have air gaps in between them, which you don't want. But just work your way down all the way to the other end and keep the seam on the bottom. If you have a really good serrated knife, you can cut these pretty easily, but I'm going to use dental floss like a lot of other people use. Just make sure it's unflavored. We're going to cut this into 12 even rolls, which means we need to make 11 even cuts. And for me, mathematically, that means 1 cut directly in the center and then 5 even cuts on either side of that. You can break that down further with either half being 1 cut in the middle and then 2 cuts on either side of that. Or you can use measuring tape and just make even cuts all the way down it, whatever suits you. But just know if you use a dull knife or something like that, it's going to crush your rolls as you cut them and they're not going to look as nice. Okay, I'm going to stack these next to each other evenly in a 9x13 baking dish, which I have greased with butter. I'm just using the leftover butter paper from butter that I already used in the recipe. It's a good way to make use of that before you throw it away. Anyway, these were a bit taller than I wanted them to be. I wanted them to be a little wider, and you can kind of press them down with your hand too, but I didn't do that here. Just a few lessons that I'll take into the next time that I make these, which hopefully is going to be soon. I don't know, stay tuned. But anyway, it's time to cover these and let them proof one more time before we bake them. You should be fine with proofing for 1 hour here. I ended up going like an hour and a half because I was driving these to a city that was an hour and a half away, but you're just looking for them to relax a bit and then puff up in size. At this point, you can load them into a preheated 350-degree oven, and they should bake up anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. You're just looking for nice golden brown around the outside, but for them to be done on the inside as well. If you want to be super sure about the middle, you can use an instant read thermometer, and anything between like 175 and 180 degrees Fahrenheit is good. If they brown up too fast on the outside before they're done on the inside, you can always tint with foil. But once you pull them out, I like to immediately hit them with a little more heavy cream. So just another dash of that, and I like to brush it over the tops. It really helps to soften the outside and give it a nice and rich flavor. You're going to let those cool for like 5 to 10 minutes before you ice them, which, speaking of, here is our cream cheese frosting that we're going to add. I start with 130 grams or a cup of powdered sugar. I like to run that through a mesh sieve to remove lumps, and I'm adding again a pinch of salt because it makes everything taste better. Then I'm going to add 170 grams or 6 ounces of softened cream cheese. Softening to room temperature is going to help us to mix this in easily, and I'm also going to add in 85 grams or 6 tablespoons of softened butter. Both of these have nice and rich flavors that are going to come together beautifully for a frosting. And my secret ingredient for glazes and frostings like this is lemon juice. And take it from someone who doesn't really like lemon flavored desserts, this doesn't make it taste like lemons. It's just that this frosting is so sweet that adding this little amount of acid is going to bring brightness to it and balance all the sweetness out and make it taste better. I'm doing like 4 grams or a teaspoon. And finally, just a couple of teaspoons of vanilla extract. Vanilla bean would also be really nice in this. I'm using an electric hand mixer to incorporate all this. It shouldn't really take long if your butter and cream cheese are softened. This is going to make a pretty thick frosting that's going to stay on top of your cinnamon rolls, but if you like it thinner, you can add splashes of milk until you get your desired consistency. If you're making this an hour or two in advance, you can just leave it at room temperature and it's fine, but if you're doing this really far in advance or even a day before, then you can put it in the fridge, but just make sure you take it out a few hours before you bake so that it can soften again and be easy to spread. But once your cinnamon rolls have cooled for like 10 minutes, you can use a spatula and ice the tops of them. Just give them all a generous amount and make sure they're all coated evenly. I actually keep back a little bit of my frosting because when I reheat these, I add more when I'm eating them later as leftovers. But you do you. At this point, they're ready to eat. And like I said, these are kind of like brioche, so you're going to have to pull these apart like dinner rolls. That's just how I like them. Serve them up on a plate, add more frosting if you like, and that's it. I didn't get to taste test on the day of because again, I brought this to a group, but I luckily did take home leftovers, so I had one the next day so I could try it on camera. It admittedly wasn't as pretty after it sat for a day, but that doesn't matter. Also, these are best reheated in the oven in my opinion. But anyway, let's get on to the taste test. Just a tiny little bit of vanilla milk. So I guess these do look more visually appealing when you put them in a circular pan, but the look doesn't affect much unless you're doing a thumbnail like I did. Either way, I kept some of the icing aside so I can add it individually to each roll as I eat it. Prince, do you want some of this cinnamon roll? No, he wants the milk. Okay, but you don't really have much simpler of a pleasure than a cinnamon roll. It's a pretty universally liked item, and it's that time of the year to have them. So let me get a little extra frosting on front. Cheers. So the outside got a little crispy in the oven when I was reheating it. If you don't want that, you can just cover it with foil. And I probably prefer the softer, fresher texture. But man, this is just wonderful. I'm about to make a mess all over my floor, but it's worth it to see this. I mean, you know what you're getting with these, just warm, comforting satisfaction. The soft and super sweet and rich bread with the sweet and cinnamony filling, like you just can't beat it. This is more of the interior. Yep, I'm in heaven. And I'm not one to denounce the store-bought refrigerated brands. Those are awesome. And I still need to try that viral TikTok hack where you cover them in heavy cream and I don't know what else they do. But that would have been a cool side-by-side to do with this. Just that soft, pillowy, brioche-style bread that I can't get enough of. Yeah, the thinner that you roll out the dough, the better, because the more filling layers that you're going to get, because it's going to wrap around itself more, because those are definitely the best bites. But I know everyone has their own family recipes for cinnamon rolls, and there's different ways to do it, even though it's pretty much the same final product. And you've got your specialty recipes like pumpkin rolls, and you've got different flavorings that you can do for fall and such. This is really just all I need. But that's really going to be it. Thank you all for letting me share this recipe, and thank you all for watching. Be blessed, and I'll see y'all next time. That's a heavyweight champion if I've ever seen one.